I'm going to call to order the October 9th meeting of the Montgomery County Planning Commission. Mr. Lincoln, if you'll determine a quorum.
Mr. Kroll.
Here.
Mr. Miller.
Here.
Mr. Sharp Robinson. Absent. Ms. Simpkins.
Here.
Mr. Waltz.
Here.
Mr. Workman.
Here.
Linkus is here. Vice Chair Foster.
Here.
Chair Rice.
Here. And you have the agenda before you. We have a motion and a second. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
And then the consent agenda consists of the September 18th minutes.
Second.
I have a motion and second for approval of the consent agenda. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Okay, we have one abstention. And public address, we'd be glad to open up the floor for public address if anybody would like to approach the commission. And seeing none, we close the public address portion and go to presentation. And we have a stormwater and erosion sediment control regulation presentation by Scott Woodrum. Yes, that's correct.
Is that better? Oh yeah, now I can hear myself. That is awesome. Okay, all right. So I'm here this evening to give you an update on Virginia has consolidated their erosion sediment control and stormwater management regulations, and they've revised the engineering guidance on calculations, their handbook, and the process for actually some of their best management practices for construction during for erosion sediment control during construction, as well as best management practices for stormwater quality. So in 2016, the General Assembly directed the Virginia Department of Environmental Quality under the Erosion and Stormwater Management Act to consolidate the regulations for ENS and stormwater. They created a regulatory advisory panel, which was first convened in 2019, and the goal was to reduce confusion, redundancy, and conflicts between two closely associated set of regulations. The State Water Control Board approved the resulting replacement section of regulations, the Virginia Erosion and Stormwater Management Regulation, in 2023. And so it became effective in 2024, and we, as a stormwater management program authority, which is delegated to us from DEQ, we will be, we're currently working on an updated ordinance that reflects the combined regulations. And that will be coming before the Board of Supervisors, hopefully at their December meeting. The new handbook replaces what they call a shelf's worth of regulations, guidance manuals, and other documents regarding best management practices. The Erosion and Sediment Control Handbook is from 1992. The Stormwater Management Handbook was from 1999, and the best management practices were last updated in 2011. So on the engineer side, it's the new spreadsheet regarding, when we talk about stormwater, we're talking about quality, and water quantity. And so the newer spreadsheet that DEQ has issued includes some new land cover types to help more accurately represent existing conditions of land development conditions, so that the engineers will more accurately get the amount of nutrient offset and water quality credits accounted for based on those land cover types. The regulations and let me find my place here, sorry. So in December of 2023, the memo provided guidance for local program administrators to adopt the model ordinance, and localities are required to adopt that and comply with these changes. So we are, again, in the process of working with Marty, the county attorney, to appropriately craft that language that will reflect some of the unique characteristics that Montgomery County faces. And some of those are steep slope language for the protection of existing and future lots, compaction methods for fill areas to ensure future structures are protected. Some of the other things that county staff are doing, we are going back and looking at our forms, making sure that they're appropriately updated and reflect the proper regulation and Virginia code sections. And we are also creating a guidance manual for the engineering community to help we get a number of questions throughout the process, and sometimes the regulation, it has the legalese in there, but we need to have a practical application and language on guiding the engineers on how to apply certain aspects of the new spreadsheet and land cover types and things of that nature. So some of the next steps that we're working on is once we get that guidance manual developed and distribute it to the engineering community for comment, we're going to review that feedback. We're going to present that at a work session at the Board of Supervisors. We're going to hold a public hearing for the new ordinance, for the adoption of the new ordinance, and then our goal is at the December meeting to have a full adoption of that. So I know that's kind of quick and dirty, or quick and wet if we're talking stormwater, but does anybody have any questions for me?
Did you say December meeting as in 2 months, or?
Yes.
That's pretty quick. Ain't it?
Yeah, it is pretty quick. We've had the guidance from DEQ. We've been working on a number of things. We actually, this past spring, we had an audit of our MS4 program, our stormwater program, and we've been working on some comments back to the representative with DEQ. We also have an annual report that we submit to DEQ. So we've been working on a number of things concurrently, and this ordinance is one of them that needs to get accomplished.
Any comments, questions?
Scott, I wonder if it would be helpful to talk about how erosion and sediment control fit into our larger development review process and how we work with your department.
Yeah, that'd be good. That'd be good. So all plan submittals come through planning, and they're distributed to the different departments as well as the Department of Transportation for review. Our staff makes the determination based on that submittal and the information in that submittal, whether it is a development that impacts 10,000 square feet or greater. So that will, in the old regs, it would mean that you would be looking at the erosion and sediment control portion until it's a development, it is an acre or more. Once it is an acre or more, it kicks in the water quality and more intense calculations required on the engineer's part. So the plans are distributed, our staff starts the review, and we'll just use a sheets for an example. And it may disturb 2 or 3 acres, and once we go through a number of, there may be 2 to 3, maybe 4 reviews with, we'll take the Loves, for example. That's an active live site, right? And so those engineers, I think, were from out of Ohio or somewhere. So we were working with engineers who were not maybe very familiar with the Virginia regs, but in general, they have erosion, sediment control, and stormwater in their state too, and they're governed by their state agency, which is also governed by EPA. So in the end, it's all about controlling stormwater during construction phase as well as post-construction BMPs. So we work back and forth with the engineer through emails and phone calls on clarification of comments. And then once the plans are approved, the owner or the contractor will set up a pre-construction meeting. We'll get the permits prepared. They will pay their permit fees, and we start regular inspections on a 2-week basis. If it's a land development project that's between 10,000 square feet and an acre, it's simply what we call a land disturbance permit from the county. It requires no state permit registration. Once it's an acre or more, it requires registration with the state, and they have to receive a letter of coverage, and they would actually get a registration number from the state that they would refer to. And then if it's over an acre and it's a state permit, general permit project, there is a reoccurring maintenance fee every year through the duration of construction. So if it takes 2 years for that project to be completed, they would be paying their initial fee plus what you'd call a maintenance fee based on that annual anniversary date of the project kickoff. Then when the project is done, I'll touch on that just a little bit. There's a project closeout process. Verification of the as-built or the project being as-built in accordance with the registered professional engineer's drawings. We get documentation on the stormwater BMPs for quality and quantity. And in some cases, like in subdivisions, you may have one of the treatments that are available is reserving open space for water quality credits for the project. So any stormwater management maintenance agreements or open space maintenance agreements would be tied up and made sure that they were in place prior to the closeout and returning of any sureties at the end of the project. What do you think, Justin? I cover everything?
Yeah, Mr. Woodrum, thank you. That was a very good explanation. I do have a question following up on the as-built and closeout. I know some of the other localities have been struggling with projects, especially subdivisions, since a lot of the sites that are being developed are fairly challenging with grading and fairly steep slopes. And the actual finished floor elevation for the individual building lots in a subdivision, after the plans have been approved and all of the BMPs and everything are in place, but when the actual house is being constructed on the lot, the finished floor elevations don't always match what was on the design plans. And then the homeowners, after the fact, start having problems down the road with water not draining well off of their particular lot. So it's not really the subdivision itself, but the individual lots. Have you seen that as an issue in Montgomery County? Or is that just something that
We've tried
folks are struggling with?
Well, we're actually reviewing individual plot plans and making sure that plot plan is in conformance with the overall grading plan.
So do you get an as-built on the finished floor elevation after the house is built, or just approve the plan?
That's a good question, and I don't have that answer. The as-built is typically on the stormwater BMPs, not on the finished floor of the homes.
Right.
So when we look at the plot plan for the lot and the layout, once it's been sited on the lot, how the grading occurs around the home, and if there are drainage swales or any conveyance systems, stormwater conveyance systems, storm sewer systems that convey water around the home to maybe the storm drain system along the road. We're looking at the grading around the house and if it fits within the overall grading plan proposed during that subdivision review process.
Right. Well, I think if it's been a problem, you probably would have gotten some calls. And if the phone's not ringing and you're getting complaints from homeowners after construction, it sounds like the development community contractors are doing a pretty good job of adhering to the
and you know,
design plan.
some of our challenges that we see are in regard to some of the older subdivisions, and when there's been It varies. It varies on some of the challenges that we see in regards to some of the older subdivisions, and if there's like corner lots on an older state-maintained road and a subdivision street that was built 10 or 12 years ago, some of those drainage patterns may not have been accounted for on a kind of, say, a bigger picture kind of view, because it's very challenging when the finished floor is below the grade of the road, and you've got storm drainage that outfalls maybe in front or along the road, and then there's dependency on state maintained systems draining properly too, and so we especially after a storm like we've recently had, we see a number of challenges that, and it's an intense, storms are based on frequency, and some of the larger storms do make an impact. So it is challenging. We could spend some time on that subject for sure, Mr. Kroll.
Scott, as we're going through the developing the new guidance manuals and combining these two systems that we're talking about, are we the bonding requirements, are they being looked at? Are they going to continue the same?
Yeah, so the bonding requirements, we use a spreadsheet with line item costs or unit costs based on linear feet of silt fence or sediment basins or things of that nature, riprap and certain pipe and things. And so that's kind of been a uniform standard for the county, and those costs get evaluated occasionally and, and increased accordingly. And so, but as far as the fees are set by the state, part of that stormwater fee that's paid, a portion of that goes to the state, and part of it is retained by the county.
Is the bonding requirement, is that required by the state, or is that something set by each locality? And then
You mean as far as the amounts, Mr. Rice?
Yes, sir.
I would say that we ask for an estimate from the
Well,
engineer.
maybe not the amounts, but the actual process. I mean, are we required as a county to ask for, or to bond amounts for stormwater and,
Is the county required to?
yeah. And then my next question would be, have we ever had to revoke a bond? Has it ever?
It has. It was before my time under another county engineer. A bond was revoked.
More than 10 years ago, or?
I would say in that neighborhood, 10 to 12 years ago, maybe 12 to 14 years ago.
Okay.
Yeah. As far as the specific requirement, is it a requirement of the state that the locality does that? I would have to check with, I'd have to check with the county attorney, get that answered for you.
I'm just thinking, as the cost of housing is so high and keeps going higher, faster all the time, looking at ways to try to save money, and it seemed like the bonding requirements is a cost that doesn't come to the county. It goes to the banks. The banks are the ones that make all the money. And if it hasn't been a problem where we've had to revoke bonds, well, then I'm wondering, do we really need all of the bonding requirements? Seems like the banks, there's always banks involved in projects, and the banks underwrite it so strictly now, and making sure there's enough money to do this, and so I'm wondering if it's as necessary as it has been in the past.
Yeah, that, when we think about the bonds or the sureties on a project, we have typically, on the E&S and stormwater side, there's an E&S bond, which covers primarily during construction, and then the stormwater bond is to ensure that the stormwater features are constructed in accordance with the plan, and then there's a planning bond. So there's a number of sureties involved to get to where, to get to the finish line with the project, right? But whether that requirement, I'd have to check on that.
And I will say, Mr. Rice, I think we are always walking that line of ensuring that we're not being overly burdensome to developers, but that we're also ensuring that the county is protected if a project is not completed or is abandoned. And I say that to point out that there are other jurisdictions where before you come before a planning commission or a board of supervisors, you essentially have to have your entire project designed before you can get an approval. And I think something that, to Scott's credit, he worked with our department and others in the county to really streamline our development review process. And so we really wanted you all, you often will see when we provide a staff analysis that we've said they must comply with all erosion and sediment control measures. Well, that's really great for us to tell you, but we really wanted to give you kind of an insight on what those measures were. And Scott and his team, and now that Scott's moved on and we're looking for a new county engineer, the county engineer and the erosion and sediment control staff are involved really from development of a project all the way through the construction. And I think that helps our developers save a great deal of money so that they're not having to revise their plans after they come before a board like this.
And I will add to that, we periodically receive requests to reduce the bond. Can a bond be reduced? And we entertain those. When we receive them, we thoroughly go through and evaluate whether that bond can be reduced. And if it can, it can. And more often than not, it is reduced. So, because time is money. And that's the business that when you're in development, that's what's costing you. So we try to be cognizant of that and respond appropriately.
Any other comments, questions? Thank you very much.
All
Mr.
right,
Wood.
thank
Thanks,
you
sir.
all.
And then we are scheduled to go into work session. I'll entertain a motion. Okay, I've got a motion and a second to enter work session. All those in favor, signify by saying aye. Aye. Those opposed likewise. And we are now in the comprehensive plan update portion.
All right. Well, good evening, everyone. We have been very busy over the course of the past few months working on Montgomery matters and wanted to bring you an update this evening. In your packet, you were provided with some information that we recently presented to the Montgomery Matters Steering Committee, and we wanted to make you all aware of that. I realize it was a lot of information, so I'm going to do my best to summarize sort of the high points for you this evening. So just wanted to go over a couple of our milestones to date. As you'll remember, we had our kickoff meeting and open house back in June, and we've held 2 rounds of stakeholder meetings, the first on June the 13th, the second on July 1st. Since we met with the stakeholder groups, we've also had an opportunity to meet with several other interest groups related to the comprehensive plan. That includes the Friends of the North Fork Historic District, members of the Citizens Climate Lobby, and representatives from Montgomery County Public Schools. We also conducted a number of public intercepts over the course of the summer, and I'm happy to report that we spoke with over 1,000 individual citizens at those events. We were out at a variety of festivals and events over the course of the summer, both large and small, and in various areas of the county. And we really got a lot of great feedback from our citizens that have informed where we're moving with the comprehensive plan update. I know as Bree reported to you last month, we concluded our public survey where we got a little over 1,000 responses. And so talking about where we are in the process, we really are wrapping up steps 1 and 2 with the update now. After we've gathered the data and analyzed the findings from the survey, we're really starting to sort of coalesce around the needs that have been identified by our citizens through this input process. And we're starting in step 3, which is the visioning process, where we're actually going to start developing some draft goals as we go forward. So I wanted to talk a little bit about the approach that we're taking with the data as we analyze it. So we are using a variety of different sources. One of our primary sources is going to be census data, and that's the decennial census, which was completed in 2020. But we're also looking at the American Community Survey. That's a smaller subset that's done by the Census Bureau, and that's conducted every 5 years. We're also looking at the Weldon Cooper Center at the University of Virginia. They do yearly population estimates and some demographic surveys that we really can't get from the census, so we're utilizing that in conjunction with the census data. Other studies and reports that are available, and then some local data through the county and the 2 towns as it relates to building permits. So we didn't want the data that we're collecting and the analysis that we're doing to really exist in a vacuum. We really felt that to really accurately reflect what's going on here in the county, we needed to compare ourselves with other jurisdictions and see if the trends that we're seeing here in the county are replicable in other parts of the Commonwealth and elsewhere. So early on in the process, we established 3 benchmark communities that we're using. So you often will hear staff refer to policies and initiatives that are occurring in both Albemarle and Rockingham County. Those are counties that have very similar demographics to us in terms of their acreage and size, a mixture of both urbanized and rural areas. But we also wanted to look outside Virginia, and we chose Orange County, North Carolina, which is where the University of North Carolina, Chapel Hill is located. Again, to look at a community that also has a large university within its footprint. So going into the actual data and engagement findings, wanted to point out just a few things to you. So the top graph here is showing our population trends. Again, this is using Weldon Cooper Center data. One criticism that we had of our 2020 census numbers was that we had a dramatic undercount on our county population, primarily because a large segment of our population, which is the university community, was sent home at the beginning of the semester due to COVID. So we know even though the county, the university, the town of Blacksburg made a lot of effort to encourage those students to respond to the census as their residents being here in the county, we know a lot of those folks were probably counted back in their home jurisdictions. So we're really looking at the Weldon Cooper Center population numbers as our basis as we go forward, because we think they more accurately reflect our demographics in those years. Some other interesting demographics that we found, it should come as no shock to you that we have a very large population of 20 to 24-year-olds here in the county, again, because of the university. We did think it was interesting that we tend to skew a little bit more male in that demographic as opposed to female. But the other thing that we're finding is the county's over 65 population continues to trend upward over the past decade. And so that number there on the graph on the right there is about 14% of our population. Something else that we found interesting, we looked at an inflow-outflow analysis of employment here in the county. You can see we have around 20,000 residents of other jurisdictions that come into the county for employment. We have about 14,000 residents that are leaving the county for employment, and then a little over 18,000 residents that are both residents of the county and employed within the county. We've worked with our consultant. This is really stable numbers. This is what we see in other jurisdictions. But what we are looking forward to as we continue to explore the data is looking at recommendations to keep more of that employment within the county and keep that tax base local.
Excuse me, Justin.
Yes.
Can I ask a question
Yes, sir.
about that? This is showing that the data is almost 4 years old already. Is there, does the consultant think that this is still accurate?
Yeah, so these are
Depiction?
generally done, I think, on 5-year increments. So we're not going to be looking at probably new data till 2026, which is going to be after the comp plan is going to be completed. But again, that's something that we'll be able to look at when we go in and do our 5-year update to be able to pull fresher figures in to that equation.
Do you know where this data came from?
I will go back and check the source on that, but I believe this was from the Virginia Employment Commission. So some takeaways that we're seeing in terms of the demographic data. Again, as I mentioned, the number of individuals over the age of 65 is continuing to grow. That's going to mean that we're going to need to pay attention to our healthcare facilities and other resources for an aging population. As I mentioned, the county has a fairly relative even distribution of people traveling to, working within, and working outside the county. And again, compared to our benchmark communities, the county is retaining more of its workforce here within the county. Industries that are popular industries of folks that are working outside the county are going to be educational services and healthcare. So the county, again, could consider housing opportunities for people working within those fields to maybe keep them more local. As we know, the county is continuing to become more racially diverse, but again, compared to our benchmark communities, we are not as racially diverse as other communities that were benchmarked. 3.7% of the population reporting as Hispanic or Latino, and 4.2% reporting as Black or African American. We've also been looking at our environmental resources. The map on the left there is showing you the conserved and protected lands within the county. As a reminder, conservation easements are those easements that are privately held by landowners, whereas our agriculture and forestal districts are regulated by the county. Also shown there is our parkland. Again, that large swath of parkland there in the northern portion of the county is the Washington and Jefferson National Forest. But we also have our open space areas denoted on that map as well. When looking at our environmental chapter, we're also looking at pollutants. And so the heat map there on the right is showing the pollution incidents. The more red and yellow areas are areas of more dense pollutants. And then the areas that are in the more light blue or in the white areas are areas where those concentrated pollutants are less. One piece of feedback that we did receive from the steering committee, this is looking at point source pollution. We're challenging our consultants to dig more into those non-source pollutants in terms of agricultural runoff and other factors that could cause non-source point pollution. And we'll be hopefully being able to pull more data in regarding that as well.
With each other. Do we have any way of knowing any solid numbers on that? Is there a way of knowing that?
We can pull some figures for you and report back. I know, Kim, we're up for a renewal cycle in 2026. So these numbers are obviously going to fluctuate over the next couple of years. I don't know that we've had any folks approach us about adding or removing from the districts, but we really won't begin that process until probably late next year.
It seems in the last several,
You're on now.
It seems in the last several years, we've been trending toward losing lands from AF districts. I'd also like to see some information on that when we get to it.
We can pull that together for you for sure. And then, unfortunately, this has been brought into focus for us over the last couple of weeks. Our flood hazard areas in the county. We've also wanted to map those. So again, some takeaways that we've found from our engagement and our data collection efforts. Growth management is a concern that we hear from citizens across the county, ensuring that we're balancing the need for additional housing and commercial resources, but also ensuring that those rural and environmental features that people hold so dear in the county are protected. We do note that we have several impaired waterways because of those concentrated point source polluters. So the consultant is recommending goals that should address supporting economic opportunity, but reducing pollutants and improving water quality. In relation to flood hazard areas, the existing village plans for Elliston, Lafayette, and Shawsville are relatively silent when it comes to the flood hazard areas within those jurisdictions. So one of the recommendations that's coming from the consultants is that those village plans really look at those areas and include goals related to mitigation of flooding and repetitive loss. We also know that outside of the villages, we have several unincorporated communities in the county that are prone to flooding, specifically down in the McCoy area or the areas near the New River outside the city of Radford. So we'll be looking at that as well as an overall strategy for flood mitigation.
and the bridge at Bowers Farm on North Fork Road. That is, creates a lot of issues during heavy rainfall, and it's an access problem for a lot of folks in the Flatwoods and Ironto area.
Thank you for bringing that to our attention.
I'm not sure that Plum Creek as a village perhaps should be added with the issues of low-lying businesses.
So we'll be looking at that much more intently. I know the focus of staff has shifted a lot in the past 2 weeks due to the flooding that we've seen in the county that we haven't seen in quite some time. So again, looking at ways to how we can reduce or further regulate development within those flood hazard areas is another goal that's going to be coming forward. Looking at cultural and historic resources as well as tourism, these are some figures that were provided to us from the tourism office. Again, one challenge that we have is not every reporting cycle is going to be on the same year increment, so we're using the most recent data that's available to us. But it should come as no surprise to you that the county is a very popular tourist destination for a variety of different reasons. So the charts here are showing just the number of attendees that are coming in for nonprofits, arts, and cultural events in the county. Total attendance by local attendees is a little over 500,000. Non-local attendees, 224,000. It's interesting to note, though, and it should come again as no surprise, that folks who are from out of town are spending more money than those who live here. So we thought that it was interesting to include the figures here of the average spending of an individual per event and breaking down how they spend their money when they're here in the county. So some key takeaways here: college sporting events at the universities attract the largest number of tourists to the region. As a result of that, they do also generate a number of our impacts here. So we've come before you several times in the past several years with an increase in short-term tourist rentals that are being conducted here in the county. So we're only going to see, I think, further impacts from that. So it is sort of a double-edged sword, generation for the tax base, but also generating impacts to our citizens. Other attractions include the National Forest and campers and hikers in the county. As I mentioned, non-local attendees generally spend twice as much as local attendees at these events. And then some figures here from the Arts and Economic Prosperity Report from 2022. $41.7 million in total economic activity in 2022 from nonprofits, arts, and culture. Of the organizations themselves, another $19.6 million. $22.1 million from event-related spending. Supporting 667 jobs in the county, and $24.4 million in household income for our residents, and then $71 million total dollars in tax revenue. Some takeaways that we've gotten from our stakeholder meetings is, while we know that our cultural and historic institutions in the region are quite strong, they're often competing for the same resources and the same publicity. So we'll be looking at some programming and initiatives within the comprehensive plan to further strengthen our relationships with those organizations and promote them better. And we also received some feedback from citizens that there's a general lack of support for historic preservation initiatives at a county level. I'll add some context to that in that the National Register of Historic Places, which is regulated by the National Park Service, does not provide any protection for historic properties. It is simply a recognition. The only way that historic properties or historic resources can be protected is through local designation. The historic district in the town of Blacksburg is locally regulated by the town. However, the historic district in Christiansburg, all of our historic districts in the villages, and the North Fork Historic District are not locally regulated. So one of the areas that we're going to be paying some attention to as we work through this process, are there any recommendations on ways that the county can support our historic resources better through other programming? Looking at recreation, the map on the left here is showing all of the park facilities that we have located throughout the county and in the two towns. Our parks program manages a very popular and well-attended slate of programming, and over the past 5 years, the county has made great strides in increasing our facilities, both in our recreational ball fields, but also in our trail network and other amenities. In our analysis, it was determined that the county meets the minimum park space requirement per 1,000 people. However, there are questions that have arisen through our engagement efforts on whether all of our park properties are completely accessible to all members of the community. And then there are areas, as we know, of the National Forest that are not accessible to the public. It's going to be challenging for us, obviously, because we have no regulatory authority in the national parks. But again, working with our partners at the Park Service and the Forest Service to hopefully open up more opportunities. Something else that we are aware of that what was mentioned frequently by our citizens is that the villages of Bellevue and Price's Fork do not currently have their own park space. And as we continue to see development, particularly in the Price's Fork area, the need for park facilities is only going to increase, as well as in Bellevue. Talking about land use, some maps that we thought would be of interest to you. The existing land use is on the left there. Again, our areas that are in green are agricultural and open space areas throughout the county. Areas in yellow, the darker yellow are your residential areas, and then in pink there you're going to be your commercial and industrial areas. As a reminder, in Montgomery County 2025, there was a commitment that 80% of growth in the county would occur within the two towns or in the village areas. But as you can see, to sort of bring into focus again the conflict that we're going to have going forward, when you look at our prime farmland areas, you'll notice a large chunk of prime farmland in the Price's Fork Village, the Bellevue Village, the Reiner Village, and the Shawsville-Elliston villages. And while we've identified those areas as areas that we want to concentrate development and growth because that's where we have public infrastructure, that is also where our prime farmlands are. So I think that's going to be a challenge going forward that we're going to consistently need to look at as to where we're balancing growth and development, but also preserving agriculture. So some takeaways from the land use data analysis. The distribution of current and future land uses has worked well so far at maintaining the rural character of the county in the opinion of our citizens. However, future land use policy needs to continue to limit intense development to ensure that trend continues. And an analysis of the current zoning, the zoning in the rural areas is aligning with maintaining existing densities and uses. But as you'll see in the slides that follow, we're going to see some really unique pressure in the next 20, 30 years when it comes to how much more housing is going to need to be constructed in the county. An analysis of the agricultural lands, it continues to decline, similarly to our benchmark jurisdictions and other counties within Virginia. There was a peak in 2017 with production, but as you can see over the past 5 to 7 years, that's continued to trail off. The consultants have noted that the AFDs are a great method to protect that farmland from future development, but we know that economic and environmental impacts are going to continue to impact our agricultural production here in the county. Looking at economic resources, we wanted to share with you the shift share analysis. So looking at the type of industry and the share that Virginia holds nationally, and then the share that Montgomery County holds within Virginia, you can see that we are over the Commonwealth in our manufacturing, as well as our retail trade, and then very high in educational services. Again, the public schools, the university, obviously large employers here in the county, and that's reflected here. And then you can see those leading industries over time here in the county, in terms of employment numbers, what we can see there. We can see that while educational services and health and social services are still large drivers, we are seeing those sort of even out and trail off a little bit over the past 5 years. But then manufacturing, again, remains fairly strong. So some takeaways, again, the county's vital industries are healthcare and human services, educational services, and manufacturing. It was interesting to note within our data analysis that while we do have an overall younger median age here in the county, our higher educated workers earn less than the state average. For those with a bachelor's degree or other forms of higher education, as we know, the jobs are primarily located within the two towns or close to the two towns due to the locations of the colleges and the hospitals. The county could consider attracting businesses that require more technical education, such as manufacturing, construction, and health services, to increase our employment diversity and support that growing population. And as I mentioned, again, the hospital, the public school system, and tech being our largest employers.
Would you return to that?
Yes,
one?
sir.
Do we not consider New River Medical Center as one of those? We mentioned Montgomery Regional.
And I think that was just an oversight on my creation of the slide, not an actual reflection of the data, so I apologize for that.
Thank you.
So now getting into housing, which is obviously a topic that we talk about a lot with you. So just wanted to provide some facts and figures here for you. So the graph at the top here is talking about cost-burdened ownership and rentership. So someone is considered cost-burdened when they are spending more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities. You can see that a much smaller share of homeowners are cost-burdened in the county than our renters. But you can see in comparison with our benchmark communities, that is fairly on track with what we're seeing in Albemarle. Rockingham, a little bit less, but I think they have less renters than they do homeowners. And I do draw comparisons specifically to Orange County there because of the university. We know a number of folks in both communities are either students who are renting or young professionals who have stayed in the community after graduating that are renting. So we need to be very mindful going forward of trying to reduce that cost burden on our renters as much as possible. One strategy that we know that will help with that is, again, providing a variety of different types of housing to accommodate those renters. Wanted to also provide to you the occupied housing units by construction year. We know, but seeing it graphically is really interesting, that we have a lot of aging housing stock here in the county. So you can see that the majority of our housing here in the county was built between 1939 or earlier and 1979. You can see, I think, reflective of the economic crash in the 2000s, that home construction just continued to slow. And then with COVID, we still have not fully recovered in housing construction here. And a lot of that is due not only to the pandemic and the restrictions that it brought, but also the costs for materials that we've seen continue to grow. Yes.
Calculated the percentages so that you could compare them, because right now this is just showing volume.
Yeah, we can get that percentage number for you. Yes, sir.
I think perhaps the Orange County information should be footnoted, because while we're comparing university communities, Orange County outside of Hillsborough and Chapel Hill contains a lot of Duke and Raleigh folks. So it's not really a very, maybe the best comparison we've got, but
Yeah.
But we need to keep that in mind.
And that is a good point, Mr. Miller, and sort of a footnote for all of this. We, as I have mentioned to you in several of these presentations, we are very unique amongst other jurisdictions in Virginia. We have 2 of the 5 largest towns in Virginia within our jurisdiction. Other communities similar to ours, we use the Albemarle example often. When you think about combining the populations and the services of the 2 towns, you're pretty much equal to a Charlottesville at that point in the services that they're providing and the population. Albemarle is also a good comparison because of the University of Virginia. With Orange County, we were careful in the selection of our jurisdiction to benchmark outside of Virginia. We needed to find a state that had similar land use policies to Virginia, and North Carolina's are quite similar to ours. And so that narrowed us down to only a few jurisdictions that we could benchmark against in North Carolina. And we picked the best one we could, but I do think going forward we can do a better job at messaging that comparison.
Yeah, okay, thank you.
So the other graph that I wanted to draw to your attention is our number of current units versus the additional housing units that are needed to accommodate our anticipated population growth. So again, we're looking at 2045 with this comprehensive plan. So in the next 10 years or so, we're going to need some additional housing units, and some of this number is going to be accommodated in the units that have not yet come online out in Price's Fork or other projects that we know are in development in the county. But really, when we get into 2040 and 2050, that's when we're really starting to see this is a combination of population growth that's anticipated, but also that housing stock that we know is aging and is potentially going to be coming off the market in the number of units that we're going to be needing. So just again, the key takeaways here, the U.S. Census ACS data has determined that the average housing stock is around 30 years old here in the county. Montgomery has seen the lowest home construction compared to our peer community since 2020. Cost burden households have been declining steadily. However, we are still seeing a large number of cost burden renters here in the county in the areas where there's higher population density. So that's going to be within the two towns. And the trend is that could signal a lack of affordable apartments or other multifamily options. And I know that is a concern that has been expressed by the commission in balancing the need for single-family homes with townhomes and apartments. When we look at the approvals that have been done over the past 5 years, the county has not been approving a lot of multifamily. There has been multifamily construction that's occurring within the two towns, but we're going to need to start looking at other housing options besides apartments and townhomes. We're going to be looking into duplexes, triplexes, quadruplexes, in addition to continuing to make sure that we're building single-family homes here in the county.
Justin,
Yes.
I may be leaping ahead on your presentation, but is there a population forecast for these out years, 2040, 2050, that helps us understand 6,100 units?
And again, I said there is a mixture here of population growth with the aging housing stock. I don't have that in this presentation, but I can bring that back to you next meeting.
Okay. And in this presentation, are you going to talk about PSA?
Yes.
Okay. I'll wait then.
It seems to me that we hear that we're going to need all of this housing, and we've made a lot of rezonings lately, and based on that. But then when we see the actual numbers, and we had a slide earlier, going back 5 years ago, we're only 150 people more than we were 5 years ago. And is there some reason why we think that the people coming are going to speed up? Is a lot more coming? I mean,
So there's
I'm having a little disconnect between our housing study that we received, and I think a lot of this might be coming from that housing study. But then when we look at the actual numbers of people since 2020, the people haven't come, and I'm wondering, are we missing?
So there are some factors there. We know there will be continued growth by Virginia Tech, and with continued growth of the university is going to require more staff, more faculty. We also, when we looked at our analysis earlier of the number of residents that are working outside the county, that are coming into the county for employment, we know that to be competitive economically and to bring more industry, we need to have that housing stock available for people. The other thing that we're seeing is that people are getting pushed out of both the two towns and out of the county due to the rising value of homes here in the county and the average sale price. So the only way that we're going to be able to bring those prices down is to bring more inventory online. And so I think there's a variety of different factors. It's not just going to be the number of people who are born and our death rate or our in-migration and out-migration that we're going to have to consider. It's going to be looking at ways that we're going to be able to be more competitive as a county economically by being able to provide housing in the location where people are working.
And just to be clear, the population figures that we saw several slides back for Montgomery County, is that including the two towns, or is that just Montgomery County?
That is including the two towns. The breakdown roughly, and I don't have exact numbers, but the breakdown roughly is about 45,000 residents in the town of Blacksburg, which includes the university population.
Yeah.
23,000 residents in the town of Christiansburg, and about 35,000 in the unincorporated areas of the county.
And the numbers, and maybe we need to go back and look at it, but it seemed like we even reduced population between 22 and 23. Is that an anomaly, or did we actually lose? I mean,
So some of that number is the fact that Virginia Tech admitted its largest freshman class in a decade back in 2018. So those students have graduated and have moved out of the area. So that's a bit of that fluctuation to account there. And again, even the Weldon Cooper Center numbers are population estimates. So some of that is fueled by an inaccurate census in 2020. And so I feel like when we move further away from 2020 and we get closer to 2025, 2030, we're going to see those numbers be a little bit more reliable. But as you know, we're kind of projecting and estimating based on our best guesses. So,
But with Tech's commitment to growth, and Radford University as well is enjoying all of a sudden a spurt, and the city of Radford has no place for additional building. I mean, they've basically run out of land.
and the university, I'll speak specifically to Virginia Tech because it's the one that's at top of mind. The university has made a commitment over the next 10 years to build more on-campus housing. And so I think that's going to open up a bit more of the apartment townhome living within the town of Blacksburg. But again, just because housing is available doesn't mean it's affordable. And we're particularly thinking about those individuals who are supporting the institutions, who maybe are not making as much as a faculty member that can afford those prices. So we'll be continuing to work very aggressively with the two towns to find more solutions for our housing problems. But again, we're very early on in the process. There's no specific recommendations that are coming yet. But we just wanted to provide the data as it's coming out. And again, as I've mentioned, we'll get you some more context to put these numbers into more perspective for you as we go forward.
We also need, I think, more conversation about what is affordable housing, because I'm terribly frustrated with the fact that we build what we believe is affordable housing, and then along come all the people who want that housing, and all of a sudden the price is not affordable.
And as we have mentioned several times, there are some factors that we can't control. Land is exceptionally expensive, materials are exceptionally expensive, and the way to make that math work for a developer is increased density. We are challenged, particularly in the unincorporated areas of the county, that our zoning ordinance for the majority of the county does not allow that density to happen. So it's going to be a conversation even throughout the comprehensive planning process, but then when we take up our zoning ordinance update, what are some strategies that we can implement within the zoning ordinance to encourage some more smart growth and density in the right areas? And again, to Mr. Foster's point, that's going to directly relate to our Public Service Authority infrastructure.
Well, it's
And
been
VDOT.
interesting.
And VDOT, yes.
It's been interesting to follow the controversy in Roanoke City about how they would redivide and subdivide lots and so forth. And I thought that didn't have a chance, and of course it was favored.
And the town of Blacksburg is really getting very creative with the way that they're looking at increasing density within the town. They themselves are undergoing an amendment looking at lot size, as Ms. Sharp Robinson has shared with us. But we are also participating on a number of different housing trusts with the two towns, the university, and we're hoping to get some of our major industry players involved in that as well. This is not going to be a county-only initiative or a town-only initiative. We're going to have to work sort of cross-jurisdictionally to make housing a priority and figure out some solutions to this going forward. So I wanted to just give you a few more pieces of data as we move on. Looking at schools and libraries, these are the capacity numbers for Montgomery County Public Schools on the top graph, looking at enrollment versus capacity. We have capacity in the schools, and this is also factoring in the anticipated increase in capacity at Christiansburg High School. This is not getting into what students are going to what school. That is a decision that would have to be made by the school board. But in terms of the building size and capacities that exist, these are the numbers that we're looking at in terms of remaining capacity. Again, it breaks it down there for you between elementary, middle, and high schools. So the takeaway here is that capacity exists through 2050. However, beyond 2050, we're going to need to look at school capacity. I will note that this does not take into account facility maintenance, renovation, modernization. This is just capacity numbers. And then we looked at the libraries as well. So there are some national standards on square footage for libraries based on population estimates. So that's going to be the square footage recommendation that you're going to be seeing there. And then the capacity that exists. We also know that this data, while this is meeting some national standards, it might not necessarily be working for us here locally. So we're going to be continuing to work with the libraries and their master planning efforts to ensure that we have access to libraries for our citizens. But as you can see, as we go again toward 2040 and 2050, and again, Mr. Foster, this brings into focus your need for your desire to see those 2050 projections on where these capacity numbers are coming from.
The library information is just the 3 libraries within the county, or does it include the Jesse Peterman Library?
These are the Montgomery Floyd Regional Library Network libraries.
So both jurisdictions?
That's correct, yes, sir. So looking at health and human services, an issue that we're addressing within this comprehensive plan that was not addressed in our last plan is looking at the percentage of households that are food insecure. As you can see, compared to our benchmark communities, we are a bit higher. I will note that we have a number of existing programs in the county to assist with food insecurity. Virginia Tech has a food pantry on campus that's serving their population, but we also really rely heavily on our nonprofit partners to assist in this area. One of the goals, as you'll remember, through Montgomery Matters is relationship building. We know that the county alone cannot take on all of these issues. We're going to have to rely on our nonprofit partners and other governmental agencies to assist. So that's something that we'll be looking at as we're developing our goals. Looking at disabilities in the county, we're also wanting to make sure that we are being inclusive in our planning efforts. So as you can see, over time, we are seeing less individuals in the county that are dealing with a disability. However, we have seen an increase in ambulatory difficulties here in the county. Again, that's going to be directly proportionate with our over 65 population continuing to grow. So we're going to be looking at pointing at a few members of the commission here, not me, Mr. Foster. We're going to need to continue to think about our resources, our transportation, our housing options for those individuals in our community with those disabilities. Getting into public infrastructure, talking about broadband, obviously that is top of mind for a number of us here in the county. This is showing locations within the county that are either underserved or completely unserved by broadband. As you know, we are continuing to work on this issue through the 2 VATI grants that were received by the county. Work is currently progressing in eastern Montgomery, moving toward Ironto, Mr. Kroll. We're getting that way.
Haven't seen it yet.
I know they're out there working. I will say, in an update that the county received, a lot of our broadband deployment is completely dependent on our work with AEP service provider. As you know, AEP was very hard hit by the storms that came through the region. So a lot of those crews that were assisting with broadband expansion in the county have been pulled off to restore service. In communities further southwest, we're not just talking about repairs, we're talking about a complete rebuild of the system in some areas. So that is going to slow broadband deployment here in the county, but it is still a priority.
There's a large portion of the county that's also served by the Craig Botetourt Co-op, not AEP. So I
Yes.
don't know if that is hindering the deployment in certain areas by AEP not being the lead agency helping with, is it Gigabeam?
Gigabeam is our other provider, yes.
Is it,
And I have not gotten a recent update from Craig Botetourt, so I'm not as familiar with their deployment, but I do have the information about AEP just readily available, so.
does this service delivery have to go through AEP? Or can it be something like what they're doing in western North Carolina with, I can't think of the name of it. Starlink.
So the VATI grants that were received by the county were for fiber deployment. As a cost-saving measure and as a speed measure to get broadband to communities faster, the partnership with AEP was the route that was pursued under those grant opportunities. We know there are going to be areas of the county that we're not going to be able to access through those means, so we'll be continuing to look at satellite through Gigabeam to service those areas of the county. I feel like a broken record in saying this. It is coming. It is just a very, very slow process. I will say that those grant funds and the contracts that have been signed between the companies and the county have timelines that are associated with them and financial penalties associated with them if that is not achieved. So we are turning the screws where we can to move things faster. It is not.
Well, I think also, and I appreciate what you were saying about trying to put as much pressure as possible to keep things moving, but I also think that we need to be realistic in our life choices. If we choose to live in a rural area, that is one of the things that sometimes has to be compromised. And it's nice to see that resources are being put into that to provide a high level of service to everybody in the county. But realistically, the more rural area that you live in, the harder it is for that service to be delivered. So
Right.
we do need to have some patience, but it is frustrating when you don't have that level of affordable, high-speed internet available at every household.
Yeah.
or even non-affordable. I'm frustrated by the fact that you look at that map, and I can understand the white area up in the remote part of the Jefferson Forest. I have trouble when I look between Christiansburg and Radford, and I see a large diamond along Interstate 81 that has nothing but dial-up service right now.
You're relatively familiar with that area.
I am.
Aren't you? So I will say, and we have reached out to economic development. We hope to bring a presentation forward to you all within the next few meetings to give you more of a concentrated update. I will say throughout the process, it feels like we're taking 2 steps forward and 3 steps back. The challenge process that was undertaken with the existing ISPs on whether they were providing the level of service that was required under the grant took much longer than anticipated. Again, the partnerships that have been forged to deploy broadband, those took a little bit longer. I will say that some operational issues that have come through thinking about the different agencies with which we have to work. When you think about every time we cross a railroad, we have to get approval from the railroad. Again, working with AEP, there are a lot of entities that have to sign off before we can keep moving. I don't say that to offer that as an excuse, but I do think there's a lot of behind the scenes things that have to happen that aren't often considered when we talk about the speed with which we're deploying. So, but again, we're going to try to get you all a more comprehensive update from Economic Development, who's the department within the county that's managing this process.
The presentation to the Board of Supervisors this past month was excellent, and I'd like for us to all be able to.
And I'll send out the link to that YouTube and then the timestamp of where that begins so that you all can get some more information. We did get an update from Gigabeam and AEP at the board meeting 2 meetings ago. So I'll send that to you in an update. In terms of other infrastructure, to be candid, we need to do a lot more data analysis where it comes to public water and sewer service in the county. There is a challenge in that the Public Service Authority is an independent agency, and so we have some really wonderful staff that work here in the building with PSA, and they are working with us to get more data and information. And I know that it is a priority of the Board of Supervisors to be more forward-looking with the expansion of the Public Service Authority area. As you know, we work and rely very heavily on the town of Christiansburg and their existing network when we're doing development in and around the town of Christiansburg's limits. But we also know that there's a challenge there for county residents because that service is provided to them at a premium cost. So it is something that we're needing to look at more in how we can provide through the PSA more connections. Where it comes to the town of Blacksburg, there is a restriction in the town of Blacksburg in connecting to their system that if you connect to the town system in Blacksburg, that you must come inside the town jurisdiction. So that I think is a prohibition to a number of developers who are looking to locate outside of Blacksburg. So it is something when we think about further expansion of our networks, further development in the county, working with the PSA, but also working with the Regional Water Authority, who has lines in the Prices Fork area that we're tying into when we do development. I will say that we have made some contacts to have some more conversations with those entities through our next round of stakeholder meetings, and I hope to have more of an update for you in terms of the PSA infrastructure as we move forward. We'll also be looking at solid waste disposal, again, through the regional authority and other infrastructure needs as they impact the county. So more to come there. Public safety and law is sort of the last section that I'll cover with you. The map here on the left is showing you the drive shed from the emergency services facilities. As you'll note, some of the more remote areas of the county, that drive shed is going to exceed that 10 to 15 minute drive time. So some issues that we know that have arisen as the county continues to grow in population. There's going to be a need for additional units throughout the county. Those conversations are ongoing. As you all are aware, the county has already made efforts to improve public safety in the creation of the fire and EMS department. To fill some gaps that were created in certain areas of the county due to decreases in volunteerism. There have also been conversations between the county and the two towns on ways that we could potentially partner on future facilities to address public safety. In discussions with the Commonwealth Attorney's Office, there was a noted issue related to accessibility of their services by individuals in the rural areas of the county. Obviously, the services themselves are consolidated within the central portion of the county here in the county seat in Christiansburg. So we'll be looking at some programming and initiatives to potentially be able to bring services into those more rural areas, knowing that the physical locations of those facilities probably won't be able to be changed.
If a hospital system decides to build an auxiliary emergency facility, for example, do we have a role in that, or that's strictly corporate decision?
A little bit of both. We do have the two healthcare providers in the area. One of them is much more local than the other. I will say that there's representation on both of their boards from leaders in the county, both elected officials and staff members. So I do believe that the local considerations are being voiced at the board level. Whether that translates into a business decision by the healthcare provider, I can't say. But. So, talking to you about some next steps. Again, we're moving out of data gathering and analysis. We still have some pieces that still need to be reviewed. As you can imagine, it takes some time to go through 1,008 survey responses. It's always a challenge when you're designing public input on whether you leave questions open-ended or very defined. I will say we had some people that had some very strong opinions and very lengthy opinions that were entered into the survey. So we are working through that data. The other challenge, as I mentioned, is we have the two large towns within our jurisdiction. So we're parsing out what are concerns and needs that need to be passed along to the town government, and then issues that we need to be looking at from the county's perspective. So that is taking us some additional time. We do plan another round of stakeholder meetings to be held during the week of October 21st. And then we have another open house planned for November the 20th. That will have an open house component, but it will also have a community workshop. That's where we'll be reviewing some of these draft goals and getting feedback from the public as to if we need to be honing in any further on those goals, expanding them. So it'll really be an opportunity for us, again, to get this back in front of the public and do a check-in to make sure we're moving in the right direction. One of the deliverables that will be coming out of all of this data analysis is going to be a state of the county report. That's going to get provided to the Board of Supervisors to really give them an idea of where we're standing as a county, and will inform the development of those goals and those strategies as we go forward. And then we're going to be beginning in the next few months laying the groundwork for our village planning efforts. And as we've mentioned to you at a couple of points during the update, we're going to be really honing in on defining what it means to be a village, what requirements are going to be there to be considered a village, because I think we've seen that some of our villages are not functioning as strongly as the others. And we're going to be looking at what those criteria are so that when the community is asking us, well, why is my my part of the county not a village and another one is, we'll be able to more accurately reflect what that rationale was. And again, a lot of that's going to rely on infrastructure and existing resources that are in those areas. I know that was a lot. I tried to condense about 130 pages that I sent to you all in your packet down into a brief presentation, but I'll take any other questions that you all have at this time.
Just a comment. The video for Montgomery Matters I found to be very engaging and helpful and professionally done. And I think it probably wouldn't hurt, Mr. Chair, for us to see that one evening as a group.
Justin, also a comment, in a compliment to staff and the work that you and consultant are doing. You guys have covered a lot of ground so far and making some great progress, and the information that's been provided to us to date has been very interesting and very comprehensive, so well done.
Thank you very much. The decision to bring in an outside consultant to assist staff was something that we were very careful with. We wanted to ensure that we brought in the right consulting team. We were very lucky that we were able to secure a consultant that was already familiar with the county from doing transportation matters. That firm has also done a number of other studies and plans in the region. So I think it's helped a lot, Mr. Kroll, that they had those existing networks and connections that they've been able to connect with. But I think, and I will pay credit to Mr. Rice and his colleagues on the steering committee. The Citizen Steering Committee really is driving this process and helping to make sure that we're staying accountable to the citizens. In comprehensive planning, it is very common for a staff or board of supervisors or planning commission vision to really drive the process. We obviously value your all's expertise and experience, but we also want to make sure at the end of the day that we're accountable to the citizens. And I think that's what's making this plan develop in the way that it is we're getting a lot of really great citizen buy-in and input. So we hope that continues as we continue to go through the process.
Well done.
Thank you. If there are no other questions, I will yield my time back to the chair.
Let's see, I guess we need a motion to exit.
Second.
Motion and second to leave work session. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those likewise. We don't have any old business. And then we move into new business, which consists of appointment of a nominating committee. And before the meeting tonight, I asked Mr. Workman and Mr. Woltz if they would chair the nominating committee. And I believe bring back a slate for December.
Yes, that's correct. We are going to be tweaking a little bit this year, the nominating process, just so that staff continues to stay in the loop. We would just ask that anyone who's interested in standing for election, just notify staff of that intention, and then we will coordinate with the nominating committee for them to reach out to you to discuss those positions. Again, just so that staff stays in the loop and can provide any assistance needed by the nominating committee through the process. We will do elections in December, as you said.
Okay.
In a 1 year or the second year?
We are in Year 1, so that would be the secretary and the vice chair, I believe, are on a 1-year cycle, and the chair is on a 2, but I will verify that with the bylaws.
And then we'll move into liaison reports. And, let's see, we don't have Mr. King with us this evening. And Andre's not here. The CRISPR Planning Commission, it seemed like the last meeting was, canceled, correct? It seemed like-
No, they met for the Hans Meadow development,
Okay,
the townhomes, and
Okay.
I wasn't present, but I live in that neighborhood, so I got a lot of chatter from it.
okay, maybe give us a report.
So there was a townhome development behind Tractor Supply on a landlocked piece that's been there for quite a while. I don't remember the number of units, maybe 96 off the top of my head. And so the concerns was, if you know anything about the history of that development, there's a proposed right-of-way, or not a right-of-way, there's a proposed street access running parallel to the Tractor Supply building through that development out to Roanoke Street. Well, that did not have the right-of-way, and the new developer did not, I guess, they can't get a hold of the new developer to see if they can work that out. So it went to the planning commission with the idea that the only entry into that is through the Hans Meadow neighborhood. So traffic impact, we're definitely concerned. So that was, I don't know the vote count, but it was voted recommend to deny, and then the applicant withdrew that the next day. So that's done.
Okay, thank you very much. Radford Planning Commission, Ms. Simpkins?
They didn't meet, I have no report.
Okay, thank you. Tourism Council with Mr. Miller?
Yes, we met last week, and we're essentially reinventing. We're looking at all sorts of issues, funding and the formula that we might use in supporting the Tourism Council. We're looking at bylaws and purposes and lots of things. And so I think there'll be a lot to report. Our next meeting will be in January, but there won't be any personnel issues until some of these side issues and front page issues have been thoroughly aired.
Okay, thank you. And Parks and Recreation with Mr. Workman?
No report.
And then the planning director's report. Justin?
Yet again, I am not Miss Hopkins. Sorry to disappoint you. Miss Hopkins had a family medical emergency this afternoon and was pulled away. I would just ask that you keep them in your thoughts this evening. Do want to give you a few updates. So as you all know, this is National Community Planning Month. I will apologize on behalf of staff that with the past 2 weeks, with everything going on in the county and in our office, we weren't able to pull together a thank you, but please know staff appreciates everything that the commission does. You all play an integral role in planning for the county and supporting our staff, so we greatly appreciate your service. We will get you a nice thank you at a later date. On that vein, from staff, we want to say thank you for your support of staff and particularly Jude over the past several weeks. It's been greatly appreciated. It's been a rough few weeks in our office, but many of you have asked how you can support. And so my recommendation and the family's recommendation would be if you would like to contribute to the Holly King Memorial Scholarship Fund, you can do that through Eastern Montgomery High School. I will send out a direct link to you, or you can contact the schools directly if you would like to contribute. The county continues its flood recovery efforts. We fared much better than many of our neighbors in Southwest Virginia, but we did still have some dramatic impacts here in the county. The McCoy area of the county was the most impacted, along with properties along the New River at exit 105. We had around 20 structures that were damaged or lost due to the flooding in those areas, and we continue to work with various agencies on recovery and cleanup efforts. We'd like to thank our amazing first responders with Montgomery County Fire and EMS, our volunteer fire and EMS squads, for all of their assistance, and thank the community for their donations and contributions to help us and our neighboring communities. We continue to work with both the towns, the Public Service Authority, and the Water Authority on lifting the boil water notice throughout the county. Several areas have already returned to regular service, including portions of Christiansburg, and then today, Reiner, Bellevue, and other areas. I've had Kim pull up. Our GIS staff is incredible and worked very quickly to build this interactive map that's out for citizens to enter their address and see what areas of the county have been lifted from the boil water notice and what areas are still under effect. This is being updated in real time as we receive the information from the Water Authority and the PSA. I will say that we are trending in the right direction. The tests continue to come back clear, but as Mr. Kroll knows in his line of work, there are a lot of steps that go into place to bring fresh drinking water to the public, and we're just being very mindful of making sure all those procedures and steps are followed to ensure the safety of our citizens. So big thank you to Cody and Michael and our department for working with the two towns and county staff to get this tool up for our citizens. I think it's evident how much our staff is dedicated to be responsive to what's going on in the community. I will note that our November 13th meeting will be canceled due to the Board of Supervisors shifting their November meeting to that date. We have no other business to come before the commission on the 20th, so I would really encourage you all to attend that Montgomery Matters open house. Your feedback and participation would be greatly appreciated. I'll send out more details to you via email, but we'll have an open house that evening before the workshop, and the workshop will begin at 6 p.m. here in the Government Center. And last but certainly not least, after some more somber news that I've shared with you, I do have one really bright point of light to share with you. I would like to take a moment to congratulate Kim Wright. Kim was recently awarded the 2024 Certified Zoning Official of the Year from the Virginia Association of Zoning Officials. Kim, yes, give her a round of applause. Kim does an amazing job in supporting our team, and she has grown tremendously during her time here at Montgomery County, and I think of no better way to recognize her than this award. So congratulations to Kim. And that's all I have for you this evening.
Anything else come before the commission? Okay. I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Motion and second. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Thank you.